Thank you so much, sir, for providing us and the youth with such an insightful session and guiding us for the future. Now, we'll have a concluding talk for 15 minutes, and post that, we will have an interesting session which will be a talk with Suyash Tirak and Sarang Yadwadkar. I would request Dr. Priyadarshini ma'am to please come and deliver the concluding remarks.
Uh, while the slides are coming up, I can answer the question. Somebody was asking from psychology. Increasingly, young people are now facing eco-anxiety. So there is actually going to be a lot of work for people working in psychology, because dealing with these emergencies and challenges are going to create more stresses for people. All right. So what I'm going to talk about is this whole interaction since morning has been about you can, and that can mean various things. But what I want to emphasize on is that you have to. You have no other options anymore, because we are talking here about climate emergency, but it is actually part of a set of emergencies which have been escalating over the last few years. It was in 2009 when this concept of planetary boundaries was suggested, that there are 9 planetary systems and we have to stay within a safe operating space of each one of these systems in order to continue surviving and thriving on planet Earth. Since 2019, when this proposal was first put forward theoretically, it has now been picked up and used in many analysis. At that time, we had already crossed 3 of the 9 boundaries. By now, we have crossed in the danger zone of 6 of those 9 boundaries, and climate change is just one of those. So while we are focusing on climate emergency, and that makes sense because a number of solutions for climate change are also solutions for several of the other problems. This has been how the percentage of carbon dioxide has changed over the years on Earth, and you can see that where we are today and where we are headed. Of course, future cannot be determined with 100% certainty, so there are multiple possible pathways for future. But the important point that I want to make here is that the current level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is equal to the level of CO2 in the atmosphere that existed about 10 million years ago, when humans hadn't even evolved. Apes were roaming the earth at that time. So the reason I'm saying this is that many people have this romantic notion that because climate change is associated with fossil fuels, let's give up on fossil fuels, go back to some primitive way of life, and that will solve all our problems. Unfortunately, that is not true, because the situation that we are facing today has not been experienced by any humans ever. So the traditional knowledge is not really a great pathway to follow. It's not going to help us much, apart from the fact that traditionally we have encountered this problem of sustainability again and again, and our ancestors have solved this problem again and again. That's the only lesson we can take from the past. Because just to give you one example, the simple agricultural system, if everybody wanted to grow their own food, only 1 billion people can be sustained on planet Earth in that fashion. We are headed towards a 10 billion stable population. So we have to figure out now what is the lifestyle that will work for 10 billion people. We can't go back to something which was sustainable for 1 billion people. Sustainability is relative. If we see how we have progressed, we can only move forward. Most of the period when we were going through cycles of ice ages, we were roaming around, hunting, gathering. At the end of the last ice age, humans did something which no other species had done before, and that was settling down and involving in agriculture, growing their own food, creating their own resources. And no other species had taken that pathway. So that is where we sort of separated from other living organisms. And fortunately for us, we have enjoyed about 11,000 years of fairly stable climatic conditions, and this is the period in which from agriculture we moved to civilizations, we built cities, we had industrial revolution, and we have created this global human society that we are living in today. We can now only keep moving forward and figure out how we can create a sustainable life for 10 billion people in this climate challenged world that we are living in. So traditional wisdom is not really going to help us. We have to find new ways of doing things. We have to think outside the box. It's also important to understand that this whole, again, a romantic notion of pre-industrial world being some kind of an idealistic world is also a wrong picture. We had at that point in time, in fact, all the renewable energy sources were driving technologies and industries at that time. Although we say that industrial revolution happened in Europe, that doesn't mean that no industries existed before that. There were industries all over the world. However, those were being driven by low power energy sources. The rate of production was low, the rate of consumption was low, the markets were local. What industrial revolution did is it gave us a high power energy source, suddenly increased the manufacturing capacities of industries in Europe, and they started consuming raw materials at a tremendous rate and also needed bigger markets, and that was the trigger for imperialism, and that is what has actually created the world that we live in today. However, this world before the industrial revolution was also a world where labor was getting exploited, because slavery was big time thing at that time, for example, a caste system in our part of the world. So exploitation of human labor was definitely there. Epidemics were happening frequently. Human lifespan was quite low. There were huge income disparities. Frequently wars were happening locally. So it was not an ideal world. We generally tend to focus only on environment when we talk about sustainability. But sustainability is also about creating a good life for people without harming the environment. But that creating good life for people is also equally important. So this is not the world that we want to go back to. The 21st century agenda, therefore, must be twofold. One is that we have to maintain the environmental integrity of planet Earth, and at the same time, we have to ensure decent quality of life for everyone. In a way, this challenge has now become easier, because we have actually succeeded since 1960s onwards. We have succeeded in bringing down the birth rates across the world. The population has been growing because people are also living longer. But now we are reaching a stage where birth rates have fallen sufficiently. Lifespans are not really increasing beyond this much faster, and therefore we are heading to a plateau where we are stabilizing the population. So we now know exactly that we want to use the resources of the planet for 10 billion people. So that one number is now constant. That makes the problem actually easier than trying to figure out how are we going to share something with a growing population. So ensuring decent quality of life for 10 billion human beings. That's the second part, which doesn't get talked about enough. As far as climate change is concerned, we are now in a situation where we need to reduce carbon dioxide emissions, definitely. But whatever emissions that have happened since about 1850 onwards, already irreversible impacts have been created. Already the conditions have changed to a stage where no humans had ever experienced them before, which means that we have to also focus on adaptation. We have to learn to live with conditions which are not exactly ideal for humans. That is another aspect that I also want to point out here. When we talk about protecting environment, if we look at the Earth's history, geological history of 4 billion years, Earth's environment has undergone tremendous variations. Life evolved on Earth almost immediately as soon as the planet was formed. So life in some form or other has always existed on Earth. Even when there was no oxygen in the atmosphere, there was life on Earth. So what is this environment that we are trying to protect? We are trying to protect those environmental conditions which are good for us. This whole idea of protecting environment is by default human-centric. And therefore this whole idea that you have to sacrifice environment in order to do some welfare for humans is a totally wrong notion. This environment versus development is a totally false argument, because we are actually trying to protect the environment in order to protect humans. Otherwise, as it was also mentioned in the morning, humans will disappear, the earth will survive, life on earth will also survive. This is never going to be a lifeless planet. Evolution will just take different pathways, some different species will evolve. So all our focus is for protecting ourselves, and that is something that we have to keep in mind. We are not doing any favors to tigers or any other species by saving them. We are basically trying to save ourselves. So adaptation therefore is important, and we are seeing, because of climate change, increasing natural disasters. How do we respond to those disasters? How do we prepare for that? And when the disaster happens, how do we recover from that? All three areas is what we have to work on. And it's not just individuals, but communities will have to prepare for all three. Businesses have to prepare for all three. Financial institutions, governments from local government to national government, and global institutions. On all fronts, we have to look at these three type of actions. Just a few tips on what each of these categories can do. You can use this QR code to find your own personal carbon footprint. That's the starting point. Once you know your own carbon footprint, you will know whether you are part of the problem or you are part of the solution. And then it will also tell you where you need to work in order to reduce your own carbon footprint. Okay? You can either scan the QR code or visit this website, climatora.com. You will find the carbon footprint calculator there. You will also find some other calculators, like there is a water footprint calculator, there is a plastic footprint calculator for individuals and families. So do check that out. That will be a good starting point to decide what you want to be your own personal action to solve climate change. But that is not all. That's just one half of the story. The other half of the story is you also have to now figure out what are the climate risks that are going to hit you personally, wherever you are living. So find out from your location, this is a list of questions which you can ask long-term residents in your neighborhood to try and figure out what are the climate risks that are increasing in the location that you are staying in. Different people have also tried to figure out, now there is data available, district-wise climate vulnerabilities have been listed for India by several organizations. Indian Meteorology Department also has a website on which this data is available. So you can look at the information from the ground and compare it with what are the weather trends that are changing, etc., and figure out what are your climate vulnerabilities. So you can work on two fronts. One is how do you protect yourself, and how do you reduce your own contribution to climate change. These are some actions that you can carry out. These have been talked about mostly throughout the day, so I'm not going to dwell a lot on this. But being a responsible citizen is also a climate response. Please understand this. Science-based decision making is what we really want now, and that is why voting for scientific temper, equity, because we want to create a good world for 10 billion people and harmony and peace. Vote for those people who put value on these parameters. At community level, this is something which I am proposing, and because there are students here, you can also implement this in your educational campuses. You can do carbon accounting of your own neighborhood, of your own community, or of your own educational campus. And you can figure out your own pathway and action plan towards carbon neutrality, which will involve changes in the way you operate, and some technological retrofits will also be involved in it. So this is one way you can start. I mean, at your household level, you are doing something. At your community level, at the educational institute that you are in, if you are in a workspace, you can of course also do it in your workspace. What this is going to do is, firstly, you will start thinking in a climate responsive manner. Every buying decision, you will also think about what is the carbon footprint of this product. Whether this product is going to help add to the problem or is it part of the solution. Those will also become your criteria in your decision making. A work culture, a thought culture of climate aligned thinking will evolve. And eventually, of course, the neighborhood or the campus will become climate aligned. And especially for students, as you move out of your academic institution and go into your workplaces, you will take that thought process with you in your workplaces, and that is how it will spread in a way. Businesses must conduct, again, carbon accounting and vulnerability assessments of their own, set carbon neutrality targets, work for resilience building also. How do you address your climate risks? And then first you work on yourself in your own factory, in your own office, in your own place of business, and then look at your supply chain and look at your clients and help them also become climate aligned. So step by step, we sort of start spreading this thought process across professional networks also. Funders and financing institutions, to some extent, this has already started happening. Many investors are deciding not to invest in fossil fuel companies. And more investment is moving towards renewable energy. So that is an interesting phenomenon where money is now driving environmental conservation. Prioritize funding for climate vulnerable communities. Again, this was a point that was made, that not everybody is impacted equally. And those people who are getting impacted the most are the ones who have not contributed to the problem at all. These are communities whose livelihoods depend on their local ecosystems, tribal populations, fishing communities, subsistence farmers. These are the people, urban poor, these are the people who are getting impacted the most, and they need help the most. So try to create mechanisms to support them to deal with their climate emergencies. And investment is required in research and development, as well as piloting of newer, more innovative mitigation and adaptation processes. At the government level, we have in India carbon neutrality target. I have just put there some years for comparison. India has said that they'll go carbon neutral by 2070, which is the sort of the longest deadline among all the countries that have committed. These are our commitments under Paris Agreement, which Nitant also mentioned before me. There is a big gap that we don't really have in any of our international commitments. We are not saying anything about adaptation. We are not saying anything about even disaster response. Although at the state level, state action plans on adaptation are being worked out. However, these plans require different state departments to work together. Something which typically government departments find very, very difficult to do. And this is not the first time there are state action plans. There was one round of state action plans earlier, which I think even the government officials would have forgotten about, because nothing was really implemented. Glossy reports were printed. So we have to really see what happens with these adaptation plans now. Policies are doing and creating some interesting opportunities, some of which even Nitan mentioned, and I'm sort of highlighting this for those of you who are not from engineering science background. Business responsibility and sustainability reporting is mandatory for certain number of companies, that is increasing year on year, which means that a large number of various types of auditors and accountants are going to be required. We don't have enough of those in India. So this is a huge opportunity. Every emergency also is an opportunity. So young people should look at this as a career opportunity. Apart from that, there is going to be a need for climate and sustainability literacy across the board. So there are huge opportunities in education also. So lots of things are happening if you really open your eyes and start looking around. Global institutions, this is a big concern, particularly now. We have had several attempts so far to deal with climate change globally. Kyoto Agreement failed. Paris Agreement is not quite on track for meeting its target. And with the current change in government in USA, the situation has really become very, very concerning, because United States is one of the biggest emitters, and the current government is increasing fossil fuel production. So what is going to happen because of that is, there was an analysis that we will see about 1 billion additional carbon dioxide equivalent greenhouse gases going into the atmosphere because of Mr. Trump every year. So we are going to miss a lot of sort of landmarks in this pathway to Paris Agreement because of this. Also, there is an adaptation fund in which developed countries are supposed to put money. USA is definitely not going to put any money there. And it is going to encourage other countries to also drop out. And this is something which we have to be concerned about, because see, what is happening in US is that it is the fossil fuel companies which have funded his election. In India also, petroleum companies drive our politics. Will the political will to continue on track for energy transition remain in India? That's a question that we have to really be asking ourselves and our government. Because there is this huge conflict of interest there. The biggest funders of politics across the world are fossil fuel companies. And across the world, we want to move away from fossil fuels. How is this going to happen? So young people, you will need to create new politics in order to pull us out of this black hole. So that is additional career pathways for you. So this is it. I mean, humanity currently is at crossroads. Our desired pathway is what is there on the top. We want to reduce ecological damage. We want to start reversing the greenhouse gas emissions trends. If we can manage to meet these milestones, we will have a sustainable society by 2100 of about 9 to 10 billion people. However, currently we are on this lower pathway. The interesting part is that it is still leading towards a sustainable society. But it will have only about 2 to 3 billion people. Please try to understand what this means. I am 50 plus. I am not going to be around in the latter half of this century. But all the young people here, you are going to be there if you stay alive. If we are heading from 10 billion to 3 billion, what does that mean for you individually and your children? Please think about that. That is the reason why you have to. It is no longer a matter of whether you can or cannot or should not, but you have to for your own survival. Humanity is not going to be wiped out. We will end up being a sustainable society. It's just a matter of how many people will be enjoying that sustainability. So, as a generation, history will be looking back at you, and you will be identified as either the last generation in a collapsing civilization or the first generation that attained true sustainability, that not only created environmental conservation, but also created a just and equal world for all humanity. So a lot rests on your shoulders. These 2 decades are going to be very, very crucial. Political and economic decisions taken in these 20 years will decide the fate of humanity for the next 200 years. The choice is therefore in your hands. Where do you want to go from here, where we are at this point in time? So that's it from me. Another QR code there. If you are interested in these type of conversations, understanding the possible solutions, meeting other crazy people who feel that they can actually solve this, you can join this group and participate in the discussions there. It's a WhatsApp group, Citizen of Sustainable City. Thank you very much.